In this video, I'm going to talk about verbal adverbs and adjectives. I'm going to make it into two, one on verbal adverbs and one on verbal adjectives. Sometimes these are called participles. And this is a topic that if you continue your study of Russian, which I hope you will learn more about. Right now, we're just going to sort of get a little bit of an introduction to it so that you'll know about the existence of these words. And so that especially if you decide to start watching some Russian news or films, and especially reading Russian literature or news, for example, that you'll be able to recognize these. So that's all I will ask you now to be able to do, is to recognize these. So first we're going to talk about verbal adverbs. Sometimes people call these gerunds, but they're a little bit different than gerunds in English. Basically, they're a hybrid of a verb and an adverb. They're made from a verb, but they're more like the form of an adverb, in that they don't have tense and they don't change their form. We have two types, imperfective, which you can imagine are made from imperfective verbs, and perfectives, which are made from perfective verbs. Almost all the time, maybe even all the time, you can replace these with other time expressions like когда, when, пока, while, or после того как, after. So why do we need these then? There are a few reasons. One is style, to have a different way of expressing something. And then also, as you'll see in some of the examples, these can be a little bit more efficient. Let's look at a few examples. First, we have an example of an imperfective. Слушай радио, мой отец читал газету. Imperfective verbal adverbs show simultaneous action, so something happening at the same time as something else happening. So while listening to the radio, my dad was reading the newspaper. You might realize that we can replace this with когда. We can change the sentence. Когда он слушал радио, мой отец читал газету. Basically, this sentence means the same as the other. It's just maybe a little bit longer and has a little bit of a different style to it. Let's take a look at a perfective example. Посмотрев фильм, мы пошли в кафе. What perfective verbal adverbs do is they show consecutive actions. So first one thing happened, here, having watched the film, then a second thing happened. We went to the cafe. You might realize we could rephrase this with после того как. После того как мы посмотрели фильм, мы пошли в кафе. So after we had watched the film, we went to the cafe. But you can see that this one's quite a bit longer than this one. So this one's a little bit more efficient. As we said, imperfective verbal adverbs show simultaneous action. Two things happening at once. How do you form them? We're not really going to focus much on that. I'm not going to ask you to be able to form them. But what I want you to be able to do is recognize them. So notice they end in a or ya. So for the verb делать, for example, делая. Говорить, говоря. Сидеть, сидя. So if you see something like this in your reading or hear something that looks like a verb in the beginning but then ends in a, ya, or ya, you can take a good guess that it might be a verbal adverb. What I want to show you here is that the verbal adverb itself does not have any tense. The only way we tell the tense of what's going on in the sentence is the tense of the other verb. So let's take a look at this example. Она пишет свою работу, слушая радио. She is working on her paper, she's writing her paper while listening to the radio. Она писала свою работу, слушая радио. She was working on her paper while listening to the radio. Она будет писать свою работу, слушая радио. She will be writing her paper while listening to the radio. Here, all of these look the same. The only way we can tell the difference in the meaning is by the other verb's tense. So here present tense, here past tense, and here future tense. Let's try a few of these. Here I have some sentences with verbal adverbs, imperfective. We're talking about two things happening at the same time. So what we'll want to do is replace the sentence with maybe когда. So ужиная, он смотрит телевизор. Начиная лекцию, профессор закрывает дверь. Говоря по телефону, мама готовила ужин. Pause and see if you can figure out how you would rewrite these sentences with когда. Here we go. Когда он ужинает, он смотрит телевизор. These sentences basically mean the same thing. Профессор закрывает дверь, когда он начинает лекцию. Пока мама говорила по телефону, она готовила ужин. Now we're going to look at perfective verbal adverbs. As we said, these mean actions that happen consecutively. First one thing, then another. Again, I'm not going to focus much on the formation. I'm not going to ask you to form these. I just want you to be able to recognize them. Almost all of them end in v. The only exceptions to those are verbs that end in t, many of those being verbs of motion like paiti, for example. Those will end in ya. That's tricky because that looks like imperfective. But for the most part, just focus on that most of these end in v. So if we take the verbs написать, посмотреть, прочитать, we can look at their perfective verbal adverb forms. Написав, посмотрев, прочитав. Again, we can't tell the tense by the verbal adverb itself. It won't change according to tense. So the only way we have to tell the tense of the sentence is by looking at the other verb. And of course, with perfectives, we can't have present tense. So we only have past or future as our choices. Заметив нового студента, Алина подошла к нему. Having noticed the new student, she went up to him. First she did this, then she did that. Here's the future equivalent of that. Заметив нового студента, Алина подойдет к нему. Once she notices the new student, she will go up to him. So again, this part of the sentence doesn't look different. The only way we can tell the tense is by looking at the other part of the sentence. Let's take a look at some examples here. We will pause and try to rephrase using, you can use either когда or после того как. Посмотрев передачу, она написала свою работу. So first this happened, then this happened. Написав контрольную, мы пойдем на вечеринку. Once this happens, then this will happen. Не поняв вопрос, она спросила еще раз. This happened first, then this. Позвонив маме, мы поужинаем. Once this happens, then this will happen. Pause and try it. Посмотрев передачу, она написала свою работу. Когда она посмотрела передачу, она написала свою работу. When she had finished watching the show, then she worked on her paper. Then she wrote her paper. Написав контрольную, мы пойдем на вечеринку. После того, как мы напишем контрольную, мы пойдем на вечеринку. After we finish our test, after we write our test, we will go to the party. Не поняв ответ, она спросила еще раз. После того, как она не поняла ответ, она спросила еще раз. After she had not answered or not understood the answer, she asked again. Позвонив маме, мы поужинаем. Когда мы позвоним маме, мы поужинаем. Once we call mama, we will have dinner. After this video, you're going to try rephrasing these by using когда or после того как. So if we look at our summary chart of participles, we've just learned a little bit about verbal adverbs. Imperfectives will end in a, ya. Perfectives, most of the time v, sometimes ya.